Hi there, it's Manda again. Now I'm taking you through part 2 today, which is part 2 of what is CBT. And as I explained in part 1, this is such a tiny delve into what CBT is, but it really is the first element that you need to look at if you want to get an understanding of what CBT is. In the last video, you'll remember we looked at this, which was our 5 areas diagram of a difficult moment, a moment where you felt rubbish. These are your recordings, your musings on what was happening at the time. That's not to say that if you thought about it a bit more deeply, you would come up with a few other things. That's obviously true, but don't push yourself at first. It's really good if you just get something going and start the process of learning to separate out the various elements. Getting a bit more familiar with, is this a body reaction or is it a behaviour? You remember I was explaining in the last video that people often get those two muddled up, and they often get thoughts and emotions muddled up. I'll often see someone who's brought in their very first ever 5 areas, and under emotions it will say something like, I am unwanted. We in cognitive behavioural therapy put that very firmly in the thoughts department. It is a thought. It may or may not be true. It's a subjective opinion. It's something that you've come to as a conclusion from arriving home, seeing this horrible mess in your kitchen and feeling very much unappreciated, unloved, unwanted. But it's still a thought. That's very important to take on board today, because that's the biggest mistake I see people make with their 5 areas, putting thoughts in as though they are emotions. You might say to yourself, okay, that feels like it's my emotion that I feel unwanted, but clearly it's a thought, actually, the way she's explained it. So what is the emotion behind this? Oh, it's a real sadness. So sadness will do. I know it doesn't express some of the nuances of the whys and the wherefores, but that's what the rest of the diagram is for. The whole point of this is to break things down into its bare minimum pieces so that you can more easily see how, if you were to rebuild it, which pieces you could juggle about, which pieces you could challenge, take out, adjust, drop altogether. And there are various processes in CBT that you go through to get to that point. And this, as I say, is literally the first point. It's the point at which you get 2 valuable opportunities. The first is to really see closely what's going on, the assessment of the situation. And the second is to start to take yourself outside of the situation so you can be a little bit more objective in it rather than subjective. That's really important and helpful. So yeah, that's bringing you up to speed with what we've done. Go back and watch the other video if you didn't see it, because this is the diagram that we did then. And you'll see that it needs one little adjustment now, which is to add in the arrows. We didn't put those in before. I thought I'd save this for a second piece, because I know I mentioned that it's a maintenance cycle. So the whole point of this maintenance cycle is that the various pieces within it interact with each other. So for example, you might have that thought, nobody loves me, and it brings you an immediate physical sinking in your body. So on the diagram, you go around from the thought down to that physical experience. And you may have that physical experience, and that physical experience gives you another thought. You might go straight back up to thoughts such as, this is never going to change. And there's another thought, this is never going to change. The moment you have that thought, this is never going to change, you may find yourself doing a behaviour, mulling over even more on the types of times when nothing's changed, when it's always been the same. You might run 50 things through your head in a fraction of a moment. And that's a behaviour, rumination. That was one of the most important things I said in the last video, that there are 2 visible behaviours, rumination and worrying. So make sure you put those in if there's to add in the arrows. We didn't put those in before. I thought I'd save this for a second piece, because I know I mentioned that it's a maintenance cycle. So the whole point of this maintenance cycle is that the various pieces within it interact with each other. So for example, you might have that thought, nobody loves me, and it brings you an immediate physical sinking in your body. So on the diagram, you go around from the thought down to that physical experience. And you may have that physical experience, and that physical experience gives you another thought. You might go straight back up to thoughts such as, this is never going to change. And there's another thought, this is never going to change. The moment you have that thought, this is never going to change, you may find yourself doing a behaviour, mulling over even more on the types of times when nothing's changed, when it's always been the same. You might run 50 things through your head in a fraction of a moment, and that's a behaviour, rumination. That was one of the most important things I said in the last video, that there are two invisible behaviours, rumination and worrying. So make sure you put those in if they're appropriate and applicable to you, if you do them. You know, don't put them in if you're not doing them. Of course, this is about a record of your experience. I've just put them in some typical things. And I'm doing this very simplistically and simply so that you can hopefully learn how to use it. And you'll see then that these lines are in fact arrows. They go back and forth between all the various elements, and they might stimulate other elements, and it's a maintenance cycle, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And the point of cognitive behavioural therapy is to enable you to take a step back and step into the situation and change something about it, and that will make the whole system fall apart. So that's where it becomes really powerful. So don't minimize this as being a pointless little diagram, but just accept that even though they're a little bit annoying at first to do, maybe they're a bit tricky, actually it's really worth the investments. I would absolutely encourage you, if you want to get deeper into what's going on for you and do some self-help using CBT techniques, that you do many of these as many times as you can, each and every day. If you have a difficult moment, get into the habit of jotting one down. If you get slightly used to them, you'll be able to just jot down in your head, so to speak. So just get into the habit of thinking, like, what are my thoughts? What's my emotions? What's my body doing? Start to pick out the themes, start to pick out the similarities, pick out any that are different. You know, it can tell you a lot, the exceptions to the rule, when you don't feel so bad and when things don't go so badly. And sometimes people start to do these as well at times when they notice that they feel better. They'll look at it and go, what am I thinking? What's going on for me in this moment? But that's a little bit further down the line for some people. In the first instance, we're assessing the difficulties, and that's why we need to focus on them. So that's your 5 areas. That's your arrows, which shows how they all interact. It shows that it's a cycle. And you'll see that these things that come up underneath the 4 categories, if you do enough of them, may well repeat. You may have many, many thoughts that are the same. Or you may have certain kinds of situations which always trigger certain kinds of thoughts, and you have certain kinds of emotions and bodily responses and behaviours. And then other kinds of situations may trigger a different sort of set. So you might see that they start to group and theme together, and it will give you a lot of insight into what's going on. So why is it helpful? I've already given you 2 reasons, but there is a third thing to think about, and that is that when most people come for therapy, they want to feel better. That's exactly what they're looking for, and it's difficult to get to the emotions without going through the path of the thoughts or the behaviour first. The body can be trained. The body is pretty much its own boss, so we slightly leave that out in this idea. But if you think about it, if I say to you, wave to me at the screen, you can do that. You can give me a wave. That's a behaviour. You can bring that up, click your fingers, okay. You can do it. It's something that you can do. It's changeable. You have agency, you have ownership. If I say to you something like, think about a pink frog, you can bring to mind something that might resemble a pink frog, or an idea about a pink frog if you're not very good at thinking in pictures, which some people aren't. But you can bring that to mind, you can do something, you can change your thoughts, you can make your brain think certain things. So you can make your body do certain things, and you can make your brain do certain things in terms of behaviour and thought. And that's why it's called cognitive behavioural therapy. We use the cognitions and the behaviours to get into the things that people really want to change, which are the emotions. Because if I say to you, please can you feel jealous for a moment? Would you mind just bringing on the feeling of being ecstatically happy? Could you feel really angry for me? You can't necessarily access those emotions in a genuine way. You might be able to keep it an act, and you might be able to act that you're angry, but you're not necessarily and at any depth feeling angry. So changing our emotions, which, as you remember, was exactly what I just said, everyone wants when they come to therapy. They want to feel better, have better emotions. Changing our emotions isn't as simple as changing thoughts and behaviour. So cognitive therapy offers a really excellent way to bring about change in our life and to take back that agency and to see where the room for the tweaks is. So that's one of the things I love about cognitive behavioural therapy. It gives us a way in to things that really matter, which are our emotions. So I hope part 2 was helpful, and I'll see you in another video.